If you can't see my screen, wait a minute or go back out and come back in. Many times it's just your internet speed. I do have like really great internet speed, so you might just not get it yet. Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the 3rd of April, and we are looking at our psychosexual stages. We're going to start with that. Today's lesson is on human development and the important role it plays on these test questions. We really have to know normal human development, and we have to know our theories. Remember, when it talks about anything on the test, when it's discussing anything about behavior, age, stages, it's either going to be normal human development or one of my theorists. Okay, so I'm always looking behind the question. What are they looking for? We'll do some questions later because you always remind us that it is a reading test. So Erickson usually labeled systonic or dystonic. What? Right? Those terms, egosyntonic and egodystonic, Erickson used those all as well. Erickson is the only theorist that has 8 stages. He's the only theorist that goes from birth to adulthood. So he was a follower of Freud. So if you have read or seen any of my other videos, he was actually, he went to school with Anna Freud, Freud's daughter. He went to school with her. So that's where some of that psychoanalytic stuff came from. So what we know is the first stages of Erickson line up with the first 3 stages of Freud. And if you're new with me, I suggest that you don't take notes. I suggest that you just be in the moment, watch the video. You can watch this 17,000 times and slow it down, but don't miss anything. Stay in the moment, okay? So then so remember the first 3. That's what we're always going to remember, and that's how they line up. So then what I know is oral, anal, phallic latency. That is where he said any of our sexual development occurred. Okay, so I'm going to line those up with Erickson's terms, and I'm going to say, so trust versus mistrust. That is my baby's laying in the crib, and they're praying for mom to come get them. Oh my gosh, I'm crying. Mom, where are you? It's always mom's fault. Don't ever forget that. It's never dad's fault. Okay, and then when it comes to my autonomy versus shame and doubt, those are my terrible 2s, right? So 2s is the same as the anal stage. The anal stage is potty training, right? So that is the anal stage, autonomy versus shame and doubt. My 3rd stage, 3 to 5, that is the phallic stage of Freud. In Freud's phallic stage, that's where I find that toy box between my legs, right? So 3 to 5 is initiative versus guilt, according to Erickson. So if you'll remember those first 3, it really helps you understand these: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. In the latency stage of Freud, nothing happens or it's hidden. And that term latent, you might see other places. You really might see that later on in a test question. Latent just means it's hidden. It's not obvious. And then genital, of course, is anything 12 and older. That's when we begin to have actual sex. So now I'm at 5 to 13, right, on Erickson stages. So between 5 and 13, that's when you're in elementary school. That is where you learn what you're good at. And the way that I remember that is it's your industry, right? What is your town known for? And if you've seen any of my videos, I live in Chattanooga, right? We are known for that choo-choo. We really have like a great mountain range and a lot of cool things here. But when you think of Chattanooga, you think of that. We're actually the home of the Coca-Cola bottling plant. So Coca-Cola was started in Atlanta. And the story goes that the people went down and offered the bottle of the Coke, and the original Coke people said, no way, it'll never sell, because fountain drinks were what you bought at the time. So he sold the rights to someone that lives here, a Chattanooga family, for $1. So we have a very wealthy part of our country that is our city made of Coke dollars, right? So bottling company. But that's our industry. That's what we're known for. So when you look back in elementary school, remember what you were good at. So what he says is in those years, you've got to find out what you're good at. If you don't, you'll feel inferior your entire life. Okay? I tell you that I was a third, fourth, and fifth grade spelling bee champ. Right? I also went to a predominantly white school, and everybody assumed because I was Black and tall that I could play sports. Nope. So luckily I was good in school, because had sports had been my industry, what people thought I should be in, I would grow up feeling inferior. Right? I'm okay now that I'm tall and I can't play sports. I'm really good with that. But had that been my only outlet, I would have grown up feeling inferior. And that's what he said. We have to learn competence to know who we are and what we're good at in that stage. Then it goes to the next one, that I'm going to learn my identity. So that identity versus role confusion. So between 13 and 21, and if you remember those horrible middle school years, right? I told my daughters, so, the boys don't start developing until later. We start middle school. My daughters, both my daughters are my height. So, they start elementary, middle school, and the boys are like this tall. My daughter's like this tall. And I tell my daughters, be nice to the boys. Be nice, because they'll grow up and be hot. I promise you, right? Just wait, be nice to them. So as we grow and change, that's what happens in those years. So my identity is knowing who I am. And in middle school, starting 13, all we want to do is be like everybody else. Right? But mom, everybody else has it. Everybody else's mom's letting them go. That's life. That's normal human behavior. By the time you're 21, though, you know who you are, or you should know who you are. Okay, so we should be, in college and trying to figure out our lives and knowing who we are. So in that stage, I learned fidelity, to be true to myself. And what that means is not only my own identity, but also then my sexual orientation. That's where that develops. Do I like tall boys, short boys, green girls, blue girls? What do I like? That happens in those stages, according to Erickson. So now I know what I'm competent in. I'm true to myself. Then I can fall in love. So between 21 and 39, he said you should have had at least one intimate relationship. Okay, so we didn't say you had to have several or blah, blah, blah. There's no number, but at least one time being in a relationship that you were intimate with somebody. And he said, if you haven't done that by the time between the time you're 39, you're going to die alone. That's what he said. Okay. So intimacy versus isolation. That if you don't find that one person or those one people during that age, the next stage you really will if you can't master that stage, you'll end up feeling isolated forever. So you cannot go to the next stage until you successfully pass the earlier stages. So you might see a question about a woman who is in her 50s and she's got this great career. However, she never found anyone to love. So according to Erickson, she's still really stuck in that intimacy stage because she never got that met. So then now my stage now, 40 to 65, that's where I'm at. 40 to 65, I'm 56. We realize at this age, we don't have another good 56 years left, right? 20, 30, if I'm good. So at this point, most people at my age are looking toward the future. We're looking at the legacy I'm going to leave for the kids. I don't want to leave the world and the world not been a better place because I was here. Right. So those are the thoughts coming in. So, wow, I'm still chugging along. I'm going along. I need to be doing, but I'm caring about future generations. Right. You start a business where you actually start teaching future social workers stuff like that, right? So that's generativity. Stagnation is really when you're done. You're just done. And it can mean that you're not, a question may look like you're not looking at the future for your children. It may talk about that you are, you're just done. You're just done. So if you're working in your career, you're not going up anymore. You're just kind of hanging here. You're not learning new things. You're not making sure the people behind you are learning new things. You're just done with life. And that last one is integrity versus despair. So looking back over my life that's my deathbed. And this was written a long time ago. So 65 was your deathbed. Just saying. So integrity that's ego integrity. I'm looking back at my life. Am I proud of what I've done? Did it matter that I was in this world? And the other side of that is then despair. So, people who are looking back at the shoulda, woulda, couldas and the things they couldn't do. Okay. The goal of that stage is wisdom. And I always say, I wish you could have given me wisdom a little earlier, maybe in my 30s would have been nice, not when I'm on my deathbed. Right. So that is Erickson in a nutshell. And you do have to know what happens. And I know a lot of you try to memorize that, and that's not going to get it, because the ages and stages may not match. What you're going to hear, what you're going to see in the question is, Pam is, again, she's 45 and she's never fallen in love. What stage is she really in? So I've got to know what happens in the stages and ages and not just vaguely gloss over them. I have to know that. Okay. So then Erickson was a follower of Freud. I talked about that. Oral, anal, phallic, late stage genital. So orphan Annie, pretty little girl, right? He said if you get fixated in those stages, and his term is fixation, then you're going to forever worry about getting those needs met. Freud, of course, blamed his mother for everything, like every other theorist at the time. It was always the mother's fault. So Freud's, what Freud said is, what happens if your mother doesn't meet those needs? Okay, so then you become fixated or stuck in that stage. So what that looks like on a question is, the woman comes in and she tells you that, she's really trying to lose weight, and it keeps going up, and she doesn't really recall eating that much more, right? Because Freud said it was unconscious. So what she was doing was unconsciously feeling that oral stage that mom didn't feel. So mom took the bottle of her mouth too soon, right? So she now, the rest of her life, she's trying to get those needs met by eating or drinking or other things that put things in my mouth. So that, and the key with Freud is they're all unconscious. You don't remember them. You don't know that. So the woman will come in and say, I don't eat that much. I don't, because consciously she may not be aware of it. So people who are stuck in that stage, they're still with those oral activities, smoking, drinking. I've heard talking a lot, right? People who never got that oral stage satisfied. The anal stage, of course, mama put you off the toilet too soon, or she too harshly potty trained you. So your sphincter muscle, that's the one that you have to hold to potty. So if mama took you off the toilet too soon, the rest of your life, you walk around holding that sphincter muscle, right? Tight wad, tight, whatever you want to fill in the blank. Okay, so then many people who are stubborn, obsessive OCD people are considered that. Okay, and again, so I have to learn the theorist. So in this question, you're reading it and you're thinking, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And it probably is, but it doesn't matter. What matters is, what did Freud say? We're learning history. I'm reminding you of history. So when you're reading those questions, right, it's history. What did Freud say? What would Freud do? In a group session, in a family session, what would a Freudian do? Right? So Freud talked about everything was unconscious. So the goal of a Freudian theorist is to bring things from the unconscious to the conscious. And then, of course, my phallic stage. So that is, again, where I find my toy box. According to Freud, that is where the Oedipus and the Electra stage develop. Oedipus, of course, it starts with an O, but it starts with an O, but it is Oedipus. Okay. Little boy is in love with his father. He's afraid, little boy's in love with her. Little boy's in love with the mother, afraid the father will find out and cut off his penis. So in a question, right, we're going, the little 5-year-old, he needs to have surgery, and they have to put a groin in through put a needle through his groin area. What is he afraid of? He's not afraid of pain. He's afraid of mutilation, because father will find out and cut off his penis, according to Freud, or psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theory. Okay. Electra, the girl's in love with her father, and she only has penis envy. She wants to be just like her dad, right? Oh, I wish I had a penis like my dad. So Erickson is psychosocial, a little unconscious, and then my social development. And then Freud is my psychosexual guy. Whenever I see sex, that's a Freud question. OAPLG. Now, my cognitive behavior, again, these are early human, this is human development as we grow up. So Piaget is my cognitive person. He talked about how we learn. Okay. So SPCF, some people can fly. That's the acronym. Sensory motor, preoperational, concrete, and formal. There's a goal to each one of those stages. So in the sensory motor stage, that's up to 2, children learn object permanence. At 6 months, they're going to look for the ball. Prior to that, what ball? Let's pick a boo. You always get that question. They really think you've disappeared from the face of the earth. You're just gone. Okay, so peekaboo before 6 months, they haven't developed that yet. Object permanence. Pre-operational stage, that's 2 to 7. Children should develop egocentrism. It's all about me. Those terrible twos, and you can use this theory next time you have like relatives over at the grocery store. Just go up to them and say, you know what? I see that your 3-year-old is terrible, but it's okay because, you know, Piaget said he should be. All right, that'll be okay. It's okay. So make it in real life. So that is egocentrism. It's about me. But a question may look like then a 5-year-old, the mother brings their 5-year-old in because she's extremely upset because mom and dad are getting a divorce. She's upset because she thinks it's her fault. That's how I think between 2 and 7. Everything is about me. Okay. The concrete stage, so that is when I'm very, very literal. Okay. The goal of that stage is I should have learned conservation. Conservation is the fact that those 2 glasses hold the same amount. That is what that term is called. I remember that because of water. At some point, you're not old enough to remember, but we had to conserve water. So I know that conservation is they look differently, but they hold the same amount. That's if I take the pizza and cut the same 8-slice pizza into 24 slices, kids at that age don't understand, you know, that they got this little bitty slither. They just get that they got, oh my gosh, you got 3 pieces of pizza. And then, of course, the formal stages, that's where we end up. So what a question may look like is someone, an older man, a gentleman has had some sort of traumatic brain injury, cognitive disorder, and you give him a metaphor and he can't explain it. Because at the concrete stage, kids are very literal. So, you know, if you say, you know, you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas, they really think I can't sleep with my dog tonight because I'll be itching, right? You know, you get away with murder. I didn't kill anybody. They're very literal. So then if you've got this, someone who has a, usually again, a traumatic brain injury, something, and they can regress to go back to that concrete stage. The formal stages, I can do abstract thinking. Supposedly I can do algebra by 12 because that X value, I should be able to figure that out. I don't know, I might have got stuck in the concrete stage, but that is what he said. So that is Piaget. Now, Piaget also had that term assimilation and accommodation. And we see both of those. So assimilation many times also belongs to our career terms, right? I mean, so our cultural terms. But according to Piaget, his theory of assimilation is the question may say, you know, the woman, a little kid in the restaurant and says to the mother, hey, that fat woman over there looks like a well, right? Because in his mind, they look very similar. So then mom says, hey, wait a minute. No, that's a woman, and, you know, wells are animals. They can't be the same. That's accommodation. He has to make room in his schema. Schema is a Piaget term. Room in his schema for that new information. Okay. So that's what Piaget would say. And like any of the other theories, you're always trying to learn the words, the terminology that goes with that theorist. Okay. Piaget then came, the other person that worked with Piaget. That's always my chat box, guys. I'm sorry. I said everything in the chat box will be there for 30 days. If you go and try to download it now, it'll kick you out. Just so you know that. Okay. So Piaget actually has a morality theory. You might see that in some study guide somewhere, according to Piaget's morality theory. We don't teach that anymore, but you might see that in study information. When it comes to morality, we're going to work with Kohlberg. I think my keyboard is frozen today. Put my headset on, guys. I'm sorry. So Kohlberg, he is my moral developmental guy. And you'll see that his stages are a lot like Piaget's because, again, they work together. Apologize about that. I thought there was one in the house with me. So I'll go back to my headphones. Someone say something for me so I can hear you.
Pre-conventional.
Hello.
I don't think she can hear us.
I don't think so either.
Maybe we should put something in the chat.
Maybe she's trying to come in. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay.
us?
I can. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. So then Kohlberg is my moral development guy. Kohlberg has 3 stages and 6 levels. So when you see that question, 3 stages and 6 levels. Kohlberg talked about how we develop.
Should we see your face?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank
I'm
you.
looking at your
My
ceiling.
screen. Yeah. Thank you. Better?
Not yet.
You see my screen with Kohlberg?
Yes.
Give it just a minute, okay, to pop up if you haven't seen it yet.
I see it.
Sorry about that. I had to see who was here. Okay, so then Kohlberg said that we're post, pre-conventional, conventional, or post. He said that morality is not, we're not born as moral people, that we learn to be moral. So then my kids, the younger people from 6 and under, what they have is called naive hedonism. It's all about me. He said that, they haven't learned to be moral and they'll follow the rules just because those are the rules and that's what they're expected to do. So they will follow them. Level 2, those are my kids those are us, people who actually stay in that level, he said. So people, my conventional level, we are rule followers. We're going to follow the rule just because it's the rule and that's what we're supposed to do. Then he also talked about then the post-conventional. Those are people that will follow the rules, but they're following the rules because it lines up with their morality. Their moral belief are higher. Their moral issues are higher than what the law says. So those are my, I would say like Jack Kevorkian. He's the one that came up with the theory of, he talked about being able to put people to sleep because in Asia, he did that before it was legal. Rosa Parks, right? People civil that generation where you broke the law because it was important to stand up for what you believed in. So Kohlberg has 3 levels. He has There's 3 levels and 6 stages, if you see that. Okay. So just going to the textbook, and I know this is the worst chapter ever. I do know that. And when you're studying, I always say read this book from the back to the front, because the front one is absolutely awful. But it really has a lot of content of things that we need to know. So again, trust versus mistrust. Those are Erickson's stages that we just talked about. Emotional development, again, so kids emotionally, if you see 2 kids that are playing side by side at the age of 2, that is not an indicator of autism. Okay, that is just not. That is normal play at a 2-year-old, so we're not concerned about that. Cognitive development, that we talk about Piaget, that's the one that he gets credit for that. Okay, this is Piaget stages. Sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete and formal, SPCF. Some people can fly. That's the analogy that sometimes people don't remember. Okay. Kohlberg, pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Those are his theories. Okay. Some of my behaviorists are in here as well. So Pavlov is operant conditioning. Okay. Operant conditioning is that reward and positive reinforcement and positive punishment, taking away and adding things. I'll come back to that later if you guys aren't good with that. Piaget is, again, cognitive, just the names to go with. Maslow, your hierarchy of needs. Those things at the bottom are called your B needs. I'm sorry, your D needs, your deficits, right? So it's called the theory of motivation now. I know that we all grew up with it, or we all learned it was called it was called his theory of So Maslow's theory, this at the top, is self-actualization. He said very few people will get there, and even if you get there, you don't necessarily stay there. Okay. Bandura, he is my social learning guy, social modeling. Bandura talked about the importance of how we learn. We learn by watching people, right? That's Bandura. Okay. I'm going to come back to those terms, so those conditioning terms. Aversion therapy, most often on the test is going to be anti-abuse. Aversion therapy is anything yucky, painful, or gross. If your mother put hot sauce on your thumb when you were little, right? That's aversion therapy. Aversion therapy was first actually brought out when we were trying to change gay people. So what happened is they would have a man hooked up, gay men especially, hooked up to the machine, and they would show videos of other men, and if he got any kind of excitement, they would shock him. Okay, that's illegal, that's unethical, we don't do that now, but that's where we got aversion therapy from. Biofeedback, that is, you're hooked up to the machine, and the goal with biofeedback is to learn to to slow down your own respirations. So it's used for ADHD, it's used for anxiety. The goal is, if you've ever seen it with little kids, the goal is that there's like a car on the line, and the goal is to keep your respirations, your breathing, all those things down, because so the car will stay below the line. Okay, and the goal of a biofeedback is that you learn to regulate your heartbeat. You learn to regulate your respirations, your breathing by yourself. So when you're ADHD or having an anxiety attack, that you can do it by yourself. That is biofeedback therapy. Okay. Okay. Extinction. Extinction specifically means I am withdrawing the positive reinforcer. That's what that means. So I had people earlier, and if you had me this week at all, extinction means if you stop paying me, I am not going to work. Pay will be extinct. So removing the positive reinforcer. Flooding. Flooding and in vivo desensitization both belong to behavioral, but that's how we work with our phobias. So if you're afraid of spiders, afraid of snakes, afraid of heights, flooding, I'm going to throw you in, I'm going to put you in the elevator and hit the 27th floor and take you to the top all at one time, get over with. In vivo or systematic desensitization is slowly. So if you're afraid, I'll put you on the first floor, right? And then as we go, next time we'll go to the second floor, third floor, and we'll get higher and higher. But all of those are things that we use with phobia. Modeling as well. Modeling is instruction that involves the individual. You're watching someone else do that. That's modeling behavior. Right? Shaping, you'll see that. Shaping is when it's not quite the behavior that you're hoping for. So when little kids are learning how to walk and they take one or two steps, we are so thrilled with that. Sorry, guys. We are so thrilled with those one or two steps. That's not really what we want, though. What we want is for them to walk. So shaping is modeling that behavior until they get where we need them to be. I talked about systematic. Timeout. Timeout is a removal. It is a negative punishment. You're taking away the kid from the environment. So that's the goal of timeout, to remove you from the fun, remove you from something that's going on. In token economy, if you've ever worked in any of those residential treatment facilities, you've seen that token economy. You have to earn points to get, whatever you want or to get what the goals. In general, we're looking at ages. This book talks about normal, 0 to 3. Those are my infants and toddlers. Okay. 4 to 6, young people. Okay, so look at that, 4 to 6. What? Toilet trained? Remember from the test, we're not concerned until they're 4. Okay, so remember, this is not how you grew up. This is not what mom and them said. This is not how you raised your kids necessarily. For the test, we're not concerned until the potty training until they're 4. Okay, so social, emotional, they have mental, being able to use symbolism, things like that. 7 to 12, right? That's when we're starting those lovely adolescents. Oh my gosh, right? So much fun. Something you might see on the test is girls who develop early have lower self-esteem. And girls who go through puberty later do as well. So if you're in 5th grade and puberty has happened and you've got, the hips and the breasts in your period, for girls, that is definitely not a good thing. Boys who are 10 and have a mustache and a beard and their voices dropped already is pretty cool. But for girls, it's detrimental. And the same thing also then at the other end. So if girls develop later than their peers, everybody else has got the hips and the breasts and the stuff, and I don't, that's also detrimental to their mental health. So as boys and girls develop, those are the questions that you're looking at. So remember, they're either going to be one of the theorists or normal human behavior. 13 to 18, those are my lovely teenage years. You might see that term, what's it called? Personal fable, that teenagers think that nothing's going to happen to them, right? They're never going to die. They can do anything. I'm sure none of you were 18 and did those things, but yeah, it's normal human behavior. 18 to 35, that's considered young adult. Middle-aged adults is 36 to 64. And look at those ages because you'll see those on the test. Okay, knowing what middle age means, 36 to 64. Okay, that means I'm still middle-aged. Yes. Okay, so old adults, 65 to 79, and then elderly, 80 and over. When it talks about sexual development, and this is what it talks about infants and especially Freud and what that believed, pre-adolescent youth, all those good things. Know that it does not change in adulthood. If you were very sexual as a young person, you'll be very sexual as an old person. That question you might see on the test about whether or not your granny's in a nursing home and they catch her having sex with somebody else, is that okay? Yes, it is. As long as granny and the other person are both capable of making their own decisions, the nursing home has to provide a place, lock the door, and let them do, right? Granny can pick up somebody off a tender too. It didn't have to be someone that's always living there. So sexuality, who you are, personality, who you are, doesn't change. Okay. So of course, if you have a neurocognitive disorder, a TBI, Alzheimer's, those things of course can change everything. But in general, remember, it doesn't change. So if you were nasty when you were young and had no friends, you're going to be nasty when you're old and have no friends. Look, I like this one. Men's testicles slow testosterone production after age 25 or so. Erection may occur more slowly once testosterone production slows. Men are also become less able to have another erection after an orgasm, and it may take up to 24 hours to achieve another erection. The amount of semen released during ejaculation decreases, but men are capable of fathering a baby even in their 80s and 90s. Okay, I just want you to see that. Okay, so they have to be having sex with like 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds who still can have babies, but in general, please note that men can have babies between their 80s and their 90s. Okay, so for my men in the group, I'll give you a high five, and yes, you can still continue to procreate. Although adult men and women go through the same sexual changes as they age, they do not lose their desire or inability for sexual expression. It doesn't change. Okay, so Granny in the nursing home is the same sexual Granny she was when she married Grandpa and made 12 kids. Okay. So theories of spirituality, most often what that looks like in a question is if a question comes up about the client's spirituality, we're going to always include that in their question, right? Or include that in their treatment. You might see that question. The goal of religion is to become. So individuals have blind faith in authority figures and see the world as divided simply into good or bad. That's when you're starting off. But the goal of spirituality is to be a free thinker, right? To have your own spiritual beliefs, but be a free thinker. Your cultural identity, ethnicity, I usually pick those up in the diversity chapter as opposed to this one. The interplay of biological, psychological, social, and spiritual factors. That's your biopsychosocial, right? Your bio is your biological piece. Your psycho is your psychological piece. Your the other part is social, like how you're fitting in the environment. Remember, when we diagnose something, we're looking at it across environments. ADHD has to happen both at home and at school. So that's what we're looking at across the environment. So that's your social. Remember when you see that PHSI, that is physical. So Maslow said in order to get our needs, to get to the top, we have to have our basic needs met. The bottom ones are your D needs, your deficits. The top are your B needs. So self-actualization is a B need. It helps me belong, be a better person, all of that stuff. Okay. Very few people reach self-actualization. And when you get there, it doesn't mean that you'll stay there. You can go back down. Something can happen and change everything. So he is a humanitarian. And it's when his theory first came out, it was very controversial. He came out in the time of like Freud and all those other theorists. And what he looked at the person first. No other theorist had ever looked at that first because they were used to treating upper middle class people. And Maslow came along and said, wait a minute, we've got to look at these basic needs first. Okay. My bonding people, Bowlby talked about attachment, as well as Ainsworth. You'll see them usually together, Bowlby and Ainsworth. And of course, Margaret Mather. Ainsworth is the one that looked at those secure attachments. She looked at how, when you drop the babies off, did they cry? Did they not cry? That's where that comes from, is Ainsworth. So when you have a secure attachment and you drop your baby off, they may cry. So those of you like me that sat in the parking lot and cried because they cried. But however, if they have a secure attachment, that stops. They'll bond with their caregiver and they're happy to see you when they come back. Insecure avoidant, okay? So they think that somehow their needs may not be met. So when mom drops them off, they don't cry. When mom comes back, they don't cry. They don't know what to expect. Insecure ambivalent, okay? So they cannot rely on their basic needs being met, but they do cry when dropped off. However, when mom comes back, they're not necessarily comforted. Okay. And then, of course, that last one, the disorganized, they're confused when mom comes and mom goes. They never know what to expect, never at all. So that's Ainsworth looking at how we attached, and Bowlby, of course, is also an attachment theorist. The one we see most is Margaret Mailer, right? Margaret Mailer looked at the objects. Her theory was object relations. Margaret Mailer also has a couples theory that is in the same chapter. So come back and pick that up if you're not familiar with her couples theory. It's the same stages of bonding. And by the way, I'll let you know, I'm using the bachelor's level of the book. So if you do not have a BSW, I will say that many times. It builds on, and the assumption is that you know these things already. So if you do not have a BSW, that may be some of the concerns when you're trying to further. And you know, I'm sorry, you should have got a BSW. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the test is based on at the master's level, right? That you should have learned this stuff at the BSW level. So you might be missing just content. So what Margaret Mailer said is that children do not bond between the ages of 2 and 3, then they could forever have issues with attachment. She believed actually borderline personalities came from that. So what she said is reactive attachment disorder, borderline, narcissist, all of those things came because you didn't bond with that one person. Now, she did her theory, her research was based on kids in orphanages, right? Back in like the early 1900s, that's where this research started. But what we know now, what it looks like in the real world, is now you have children. Mom had you when you were 16, and you live with grandma for a few weeks, and dad, and then auntie, and everybody else for a few weeks. Now we have these kids who are 2 or 3 and have never had that one person. Mailer is a unconscious theorist. She was a follower of Freud. So that object constancy, that is an unconscious piece. So what she said is, as we grow up, we can go further and further because unconsciously we know there's a safe place to land. Somebody's got our back. So differentiation did not start until the ages of 5 and 7 months. That's when you learned that you were a separate person. You might see rapprochement. Rapprochement is at 18 months when you're going further away from mom and coming back, but still keeping mom in sight. And the last one, of course, is the object constancy. I know that no matter where I go, mom is going to be there. In a question, mom has gone on vacation and she's left me at home, and you know what, we left me with the sitter, but I know mom is coming back. Object constancy belongs to Mailer. Object permanency belongs to Piaget. These terms, when we come to our theorist, biological is anything, of course, genetic. Behavioral is learned. Psychodynamic is what we do now. Psychoanalytic was the longer, what we did 3 to 5 years of having people lay on my couch and tell me all of their stuff, bringing the unconscious to the conscious. Psychodynamic is what we do now. That is the shorter, briefer version of psychoanalytic theory. So most often they're used interchangeably, but on the test, if you see what's the difference, Psychodynamic is shorter. That's the one we do now. Anyone who's a humanist puts people first. So we talked about Maslow is a humanist. Carl Rogers, Rogerian therapy, he's also a humanist. Okay. Those parenting styles. Authoritarian, that's how I grew up. I was told what to do, when to do, how to do. The test says people from that style grow up with low self-esteem because you've never had to make your own decision. Mom and dad told you exactly what to do. Authoritative, that's the good kind. That's the talkative, right? Mom and dad, as you get older, we're going to negotiate curfew, negotiate bedtime. Authoritative. Permissive parents, they're the ones that just want to be the kids' friends. Oh, yeah, let's hang out all night together. Let's go to the club together. Oh, my gosh, right? Permissive parents set no boundaries because they want to be the friends. The worst kind, so authoritarian, those kids have low self-esteem. Authoritative is the best, talkative. But my uninvolved parent, that is the worst. You have no idea what your kid is doing. Like, what do you mean this happened? So they really just aren't there. So kids are raising themselves because mom and dad literally are just not there. Okay. I covered all of that of chapter 1 of AppGuard that everybody hates. I hope that it got through to some, like, oh my God, never get past that chapter. That family life cycle, that's in chapter 2. You'll see that. The family life cycle is normal stages, right? You leave your family of origin. You meet somebody. You get married. You see this? You get married before you have the kids. I teach college, of course, right? So I remind my students that's how it's supposed to work according to this family life crisis, the family life cycle. And the cycle then repeats itself. That's really all that happens. The question you might see is what happens in that. What do? Is we prepare the family for continuing changing, right? Because if something changes in their family life cycle, something definitely, the whole family is still going to change. This is the theory of couples development. Okay, again, I'm using the bachelor's level book. The assumption is that you know this already. So if you're struggling with these things, and in the bachelor's level book, they're written a lot simpler. It's the same content you need for the LM and the LC. It's the exact same content, but I do suggest that you read these from this book. So this is Mailer still. She has the same theory. Romance, power struggle, stability, then commitment, and the last one is co-creation. That's when we decided to have bring another person in. Okay, so those are still, they still belong to Margaret Mailer. Theories of couples development. Okay, these are my defense mechanisms. I think I've gone over those probably several times in several videos, but again, a really good place to come back and look at those. This talks about substance abuse disorders. Remember, self-help groups are not theorist-led. They're led by the person that has been in the group the longest. These terms I usually go over under family systems, right? Entropy, negative entropy, all of those things. That's where you'll hear those things. Role theory. Those are things that you'll see as well. Role ambiguity is the worst. I was hired to be the social worker, and you know what? They make me take out the trash. Remember your internship and you're supposed to be learning and they made you do all the crap jobs? Like, what am I here for? Okay. So, or they forgot you were coming. That's role ambiguity. That's the worst because it's not clear. Role complementary, whether it's a husband and a wife or me and Prudence, right? We are very role complementary. So she takes up for the things that I don't do well and I do the other things. So our roles match. If I ask Prudence to come over and make up my bed, I don't think that's something that'd be okay with her. First of all, she lives like 4 states away. And second of all, that's not her job. That's role discomplementary. They don't match. Role reversal, you'll see that with children. The child is taking the adult role the child is parenting, the child is taking care of the adult, and the mom is taking care, the child is taking care of the mom. Mom and dad got a divorce, kid is crying, kid is taking care of mom. Role reversal. Role conflict is when our roles don't match. And I know that you've seen those on the tests and you're like, how do I know that? This is where it comes from, knowing that role theory. Okie dokie, I'm going to wrap you guys up and I'm going to go on with some questions. I did a lot of talking and you did so good keeping your thoughts to yourself or falling asleep. I'm not sure which it was. Either way, I'm going to go into some questions in general, but ask me some questions. I went over a lot. Anything you've like, oh my God, Pam, I've never heard that. I've never seen that. Or just, Pam, shut up and get the questions. Where are we?
I didn't know about the xenophobia. I learned that tonight.
Thank you very much. Use that, make that part of your vocabulary. You'll sound so smart. You really will. You'll sound so smart when you add that to your vocabulary.
Yes.
I'll put this book this book, the bachelor's level, in the chat. We're also going to go back and do some of the questions based on the bachelor's level. And the goal really is just to understand that you have to have this basic content. Most of you learned this. If you were in high school, you did high school psychology, right? If you did like that dual enrollment or the extra credit, the last time you've seen this is when you were like 17. Right? So I'm telling you that you have to know this because this is what it looks like in the questions. This is the basis of every field. I teach psychologists and drug and alcohol counselors and LPCs. This is the basis of what we do. That's why you have to know it. Okay? So anybody here score really high in the human development section on the test? Those of you who've taken it before, anybody score really high? I don't recall any. Most of my clients do not. This is one of the worst sections that you score in.
Yeah, I literally did. I did really bad in this. This is why Vony actually talked about. Yeah, this was my low area.
Yeah, most people it is. Most people it is. And especially if someone says use APGAR because you open this first chapter and you want to kill yourself. Yeah. Oh my God, it's awful, right? So,
I was off by 12 points, but my lowest area was human development. It was hard.
So that's what we're talking about. That's why. Okay. Bertha, I see your hand up.
Yeah, she just was going where I wanted to say. Like, you recommended that we read the book from the back to the front, and that was like the best thing that I heard you say, because it is less intimidating that way. It's very concrete at the rear, and it kind of leads you to look at the community level and the administrative stuff, and then it kind of leads you back to the beginning where we should have started at, like you said, at bachelor's level. So that's been very helpful, reading the book from the back to the front.
Thank you for, because I do recommend that. And because most people don't get past that first chapter. They just don't, because it's so awful. I lectured on 30, 45 minutes, and it was awful, right? It was awful. It was like you're back in school.
I was really stuck, like trying to read it from the front to the back, because I was reading
awful.
But it was hard. I was stuck. I'm like, man,
yeah.
I ain't gonna.
And everybody says this is the best for content, and it's awful reading. So I really hope that you understand that a little bit more today. Jennifer, I see your hand. Jennifer, no. Christine, I see your hand.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Pam. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to ask about Piaget when you talked about conservation, assimilation, accommodation. I think I heard you say that assimilation is that integrating the new information, and accommodation is
assimilation is first. Okay.
Okay.
So with assimilation, then the little boy thinks that the woman looks like a whale because he doesn't understand the difference between whales and overweight people. Mom comes along and says, wait a minute, that's that woman. She can't be an animal, right? Now I have to accommodate in my schema. That's what he used I have to make room for new information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I know this is the worst theory. I know this is the worst chapter ever. And I know you're thinking, I know this stuff. I'll know it when I see it on the test. Yet you still like don't do well in human development. And I'm sorry, but it's just like the awful stuff that you have to learn. Other questions, guys. I'm going to pull up questions. So anything else you want to ask me before I pull up questions?
Yes. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, great. Yes. So curiosity, because I haven't done this in so long. My undergrad was not in the same fields and my master's was in social work. What is a good way to study? I mean, obviously I've been reading the book and I'm not retaining it because I did mostly medical social work. So I'm so good with the adults, but how do you retain this? Is it to do cue cards? Is it just to keep reading it?
It depends on you. So what we suggest is that you study 3 hours a day, 3 different times, 6 days a week for 90 days. That is what we suggest. So what that means is, as awful as this chapter is, and I also have videos if you're an auditory processor to go back and watch the videos. But so tomorrow morning, wake up and work on just the defense mechanisms. Okay, so in the morning, if I'm a visual, I'm going to write them down. I'm going to write my note cards, right? And then the whole day, the morning, I'm going to work on defense mechanisms. I go to lunch, I'm going to work on defense mechanisms. At night, I'm going to work on defense mechanisms. I know them when I can tell them to someone, when I can put them in my vocabulary. When I can say to a client or in my notes, you're rationalizing. That's when I know that I know the defense mechanisms. And then I go on to the next. So it really is about, there are 2 things I have to know is content and how to. And it's 50-50. I really have to know both. So I'm going to suggest watch all my videos because that's what I would suggest. However, if you're going to use the APGAR book, start from the back to the front and really kind of go over each subject area, but you have to just make sure that you break it down into small pieces, okay? And then go on to the next subject. Okay.
Thank you.
Those of you who asked you, what is your name? Who just asked me that?
Oh, Jennifer.
Jennifer, the test is nothing like the real world. So I will tell you, and hopefully you'll hang out with me on weekends a bit. We'll go over test questions. This has nothing to do with what you would really do. It's a reading test. There's a test question. I've worked with a couple of people, and it talks about the woman. She's working with an elderly person, and she's worried about them, and they live in like an apartment complex. And I haven't heard from her a couple of days, and I go to the apartment complex and I answer, and she doesn't answer the door, and the landlord comes up, and what should I say to him? In the real world, I'm going to say, have you seen Mrs. So-and-so? I am, right? This is how rural social work works. But for the test, that's a violation of HIPAA. So I'm going to make sure that I take out what I do to get the job done and make sure that I follow what the rules are. So this test has nothing to do with the real world. This test has to do is, do you know how to read? That's really basically, do you know how to go to the question and figure out what they're asking me, and do you know the content? Okay, I'm going to pull up some pocket prep from the bachelor's level. You want to ask me other questions, guys? Things that, again, that I did not go over. I'll put this book in the chat box, like I said. You'll have access to it for 30 days. If you download it, you can have access to it forever. I do suggest, even if you do have a BSW, to go back and to at least do the test in the back of the bachelor's level to make sure that you understand that basic content. Because what I did today is basic content. And that's what's kicking your butts many times, is not knowing that. Other questions, guys? Keep talking to me.
So Dr. Kim, this is Nicole. That question you just brought up, that there was about the apartment and you have a client, and I seen that same one. I don't know if it actually was on the test or a test I was, taking pre-test, but I did get that wrong because I said to ask the neighbor, but no, you have to just kind of walk away. I think the answer was to walk away.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah. So well, as soon as you brought that up, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember that question. It's so true. Because I thought that you should, well, what's going on? Is she okay? But that's a violation, code of ethics and all that. And I didn't realize it at that time.
And I'm never going to ever suggest that you violate the code of ethics. I'm going to say what we do in the real world is most often we're going to check with the neighbors because they know more about this family, especially when it's in the projects, right? A close development center, a trailer park. Everybody knows everybody's business. I live in a cul-de-sac. The woman across the street is 93 years old, and I can tell you she knows when we come and go.
I got it wrong too, because I was thinking about what you're saying now, like collateral contact. That's what I was thinking of, collateral contacts. I'm like, well, they should know. They're living with them pretty much, but I know the answer now.
Collateral contacts implies informed consent, right? So if I'm talking to the landlord that doesn't know you, you haven't signed anything, that is unethical. That is totally unethical. I can't do that. But in the real world, we do it. And I'm not saying you're right or wrong. The real world, our client comes first. But for the test, you can't do that because the code of ethics says that's unethical. Can I repeat the question? So yes. Where's that question at? I think where it might be on one of my tests. Okay, so the question talks about a social worker has been seeing a client, and I think he's elderly, and she hasn't heard from him from a bit. So she goes and she knocks on his door, and he doesn't answer. As you're leaving the apartment complex, the landlord says, ask you something, like, how is he okay, or something like that, or what do you do when a landlord passes you or asks you something? And the answer is you say nothing because, that's the code of ethics. That's HIPAA. I cannot violate that client's his confidentiality, right? And that's the right answer. That is the answer for the test. That is HIPAA. I cannot do that. Okay? But to work as a social worker in the real world, many times we do, right? We're going to ask, have you seen him in a couple of days? Did he live with somebody? Do you know his sister? Because I know the community. I know the community, and I know they know each other. And in the real world, that's how you practice. That is what makes you a good social worker in the real world. But for the test, you cannot do that. Okay, does that make sense? The test is written if you have no experience ever, that you walked out of school yesterday and now you're taking the test. You've never been in the real world. You in the test, you don't get that there are not enough resources. There's a test question, and the correct answer is to have the psychiatrist and the medical doctor meet. Really? What real world can you the social worker, get the psychiatrist and the medical doctor to meet? We're going to wave your magic wand. That's not real world social work. But for the test, that's the right answer. So I don't want you to confuse what you do in the real world that makes you amazing at what you do to what the test is going to ask you. And I don't want you to ever think that because you didn't get the test questions right, that you're not an amazing social worker. Okay, because in the real world, we're going to do whatever is best for the client. We are. I've been in this field for 30 years, guys. I know. But that won't help you answer the test. So let go of what you think. Let go of what your supervisor said. Let go of all of those things because it's a reading test. We'll go back and say, Dr. Pam said, don't you dare. Well, Dr. Pam said what you're doing is unethical. We shouldn't be doing that in our practice. Okay. I'm using the BSW questions. Can you see my screen? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, please don't answer until I say so. This is not group think. This is not rush through to get the answers. It is making sure that you understand why it's the answer. What is the main function of a defense mechanism? Don't answer yet. A, to help to save people from embarrassment. B, to help people communicate their feelings through words. C, to help to discover underlying traumas. Or D, to protect people from anxiety. Do not answer yet. I put in the chat box, in the answer in the chat box if you can't see my screen. Don't answer yet. Don't answer yet. Don't answer yet till I say so. If you're not familiar with the term groupthink, groupthink is when we go along with what everybody says, whether we agree or not.
Save people from embarrassment, to help people communicate their feeling through words.
I can hear you. I don't mind if you read out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
I don't see your screen either. I just see the.
I put it in the chat box. I did put it in the chat box if you don't see it. I can switch screens again and try again. And you might not see it, but I did put it in the chat box. Okay, so hopefully that'll help you. So the answer for that one is D. Defensive mechanisms protect us from anxiety. Okay. What is my favorite defense mechanism? Those of you that know me a little bit, what's my favorite?
Intellectualization.
Yes. You gotta think myself out of the pain. Exactly. Intellectualization really means that I'm going to stay on the very superficial thinking level and not the feeling level. And we all have them. We all have them. So you can define your own, you can define your clients, but we all have them. Freud didn't say that they were abnormal. They were, that's what we do to protect us, right? Protect my ego. So that is my favorite one. Whenever bad things happen in my life, I've been around. My son was diagnosed with cancer. And I get the call from the doctor and he gives me all these things in medical terms. What do I do first? Google it, right? Because WebMD, that's what I do. But because my ego couldn't handle that yet. Freud says that was my defense mechanism because my ego, who I am, could not handle the information that I was going through. So that's what defense mechanisms are for. And I'm sorry you can't see my screen. I did put the question in the chat box. I haven't changed the question. So if you can't see my screen, I'm putting it in the chat box.
Sometimes if you log in and log back out, the screen will pop up. So just a suggestion.
Okay. Can you see the answer to the question in the chat box, guys? If you can't see my screen, hopefully you can see it in the chat box. Okay. Don't answer yet. Please don't answer. Give everyone a chance to read and go through the question. Kima, really? I know you're testing in a few days and you're ready to but don't answer the question yet. Okay, so the question says, which of the following is true about imaginary friends according to Piaget? Piaget is my cognitive development guy, right? So then, imaginary friends are a product of social isolation. B, children are most likely to have imaginary friends from the ages of 7 to 11. D, imaginary friends are indicative of an emerging personality disorder. No. D, most children know that their imaginary friends are not real. And the answer is D. Shakima is absolutely right. That's my answer. Okay. So with Piaget, that's his cognitive development theory. Okay. And I've had debates with other clients of my kids didn't know there was real. For the test, that kids know that their imaginary friends are not real. in the chat box? Can you see it in the chat box? Is there anyone that can't see it at all? You can't see my screen or the chat box? Don't answer yet, please. Don't answer yet. A social worker has regularly been meeting with the family system for about a month. When the head of the household, a father of 3, is fired from his job of 20 years. He's the family's primary source of income, and the father is noticeably shaking. He's upset. What should the social worker's primary focus be in this situation? Again, please don't answer. The technique is to make sure I understand the question. What is the question asking me? The social worker has been regularly meeting with the whole family system for about a month. When the head of the household, the father of the 3 boys, is fired. He's had his same job for 20 years and he's fired. Okay. I just can imagine in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh. He was the family's primary source of income. And the father, Cynthia, don't you answer yet. The father is noticeably shaken. What should the social worker's primary focus be in this situation? Don't answer yet, please, guys. A, locating financial assistance for the family. B, helping the father develop effective coping to handle the change in income and responsibility within the family. C, working with the family to find new employment. Or D, supporting the children during this time. So if you've been with me for half a minute, we're going to always go back to the question, understand what the question is asking me, and then rule out 2 because I need to get rid of the 2 that it can't be. Okay. The test is written so that you get down to the 2. That's written that way. So if you're going to get down to the 2, it's purposeful. It's purposeful. You get down to the 2, you're going to compare the 2 to each other and then go back to the question because it's a reading test. So, okay, the father is noticeably shaken. That means something to me, doesn't it? Whenever I see that in the question, his feelings. To Shonda, don't answer yet. I didn't say you could. Okay, so I know that he's a primary source of income. So what would I do? And remember, it's what would I do first, whether it says first or not, it is what would I do first? You may answer the question. What would I do first? I see B, D, B, D. So whatever your answer is, you have to be able to prove it in the question, right?
Mm-hmm. I didn't know we could answer yet.
Say again? Bertha, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you can answer.
We can answer.
I said that. You can answer. I did.
Mhm.
Let's see. Nadia, you picked B. Tell me why.
Hi, I picked B by accident. I picked D by accident, but it's really B. I can support B, not D.
Tell me why. Just tell me either way. Why?
Okay. I would support B because in the question it just states how the dad is having a hard time, and he's shaken up because of the loss of the job, and therefore he would need some assistance with coping skills handling this transition.
And what words in the question would support that? You're right on.
The father is noticeably shaken. He's the head of the household of these 3 boys.
Yes! Yes!
So here is the part that could get you tied up though, because A, I feel like would be like an immediate reaction if they don't have any money because dad isn't working and he's the primary.
I get that. If I do B, does that mean I won't do A?
No.
What will I do first? And even if it doesn't say first, what would I do first. Always remember that. That's the key to passing this test. He says he's noticeably shaken. When there are feelings in the question, I have to acknowledge the feeling somehow. It doesn't mean I won't do A and D later. It doesn't mean that. But first, what I will do, and I know it doesn't say first, but remember when you're taking this test, you're always thinking, what would I do first? We get paid to be nosy. Can I assess? Can I ask more questions? But in this one, it's full of feelings. If I came into today and I'm boohooing and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mentioned like trying to get this house, right? I mentioned that, right? I mentioned that, right? If I was crying, if tomorrow I call you and I didn't get my house, you'll acknowledge that, right? I hope. Because that's what we do. We're human. That's what we do. Okay, Bertha, I see your hand up.
I picked the same one, but I picked it because the other answers ignore the rest of the family.
Okay,
And
I see that.
She's
Okay.
supposed to, the answer's supposed to accommodate whoever I guess is mentioned in the question.
Okay, I can get that. What I'll tell you and I'll tell other people is many people have gotten this far by ruling out what it can't be in the question. The answers. You're smart people. You guys are the smartest people I know. So you'll go through the 4 and you'll think, oh, that can't be it. That can't be it. But if you don't go back and prove it in the question, then that's why you're here with me, right? Because you don't do that part. Go back to the question. How do I know? How do I know? Okay. Will I locate financial assistance for the family? Yes, just not first. Okay. Will help dad find a new employment? Of course. Okay. But first, because the father is noticeably shaken, I'm going to do B first. Okay. Now, I do know that probably rocked a lot of your thought processes. Be brave. Talk to me. No, all of you got it right. Okay. Okay, we'll go to the next one then. Okay. We'll have to sign off. Last one, I swear. Okay. As social workers, let me put in the chat box. A social worker thinks of himself as someone who respects the values and the diversity of others. He often reads the publications about various ethnicities and races so he can be better informed when he serves clients of other backgrounds. Today, he is meeting with a Japanese family for the first time. Which of the following is the best approach the social worker should use when meeting with this family? Don't answer yet. Please don't answer. Okay. It's a reading test. I'm going back to make sure I understand what they're asking me. And even if you know the answer, please follow the same process. That's what's going to get you to pass the test. Don't be answering Bertha and Michelle. I see you typing. Don't you answer. So, he thinks of himself as someone who respects the values of diversity. He often reads publications about various ethnicities and races so he can be better informed. Today, he's meeting with a Japanese family for the first time. Which of the following is the best approach the social worker should use when meeting with the family? A, ask the father or another patriarchal figure to answer the social worker questions first. Guest user, don't answer yet. Express an interest in knowing more about the family's background and beliefs. C, ask whether the family prefers Confucian or Buddhist philosophies. Or D, make an effort to respect his own expression as he has read that Asian populations are typically more reserved. So I'm going to remind you that it's a first question, no matter what it says. I'm always asking first. What would I do first? So in the question, I'm a social worker. I'm well read. I've read all these articles on these different people, blah, blah, blah. Like, look at me, I know. So then I am working with the family. What is the best is the following approach the social worker should use when meeting the family? You might answer now. Mika, can you see it in the chat box though? I know it's in the question. I did put it in the chat box. If you can't see D, I apologize. Again, I put it in the chat box if you can't see it. Cynthia, tell me why you picked B.
Hi, Dr. Pam. I picked B because of the question and how it's framed. So,
Okay.
what the question is saying about the social worker is in the fact that there's someone who respects and values the diversity of others. You can't respect and value a person that you know nothing about. And
Oh, look at you.
and
I'm
and
not
so
sure that I read that in any social work book, but it sounds really good. Okay.
Well, and so for me, it was just a no-brainer because of the question
Okay.
that in order for me to respect values, and I don't know this individual, I have to find out about the individual's background. That was my logic.
You're absolutely
Assess.
right. You're absolutely right. What I don't like though is you brought in stuff that wasn't in the question.
Oh,
Okay. And so
okay.
don't do that. And you're right. You're absolutely right. But you won't be right on all the questions. Okay. Just
Mm-hmm.
because it's a reading test, right?
Okay.
It's a don't come on, hang with me.
All
Uh,
right.
so really, so most of us can weed out what it's not going to be, but I have to go back to the question and prove it. What words prove it to me, or how do I know? Okay, and the answer is because I need to assess first. That's what you told me. That's exactly what you said. So I need to
Mhm.
assess first because that's the social work problem solving process is to assess first.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the thing that stuck out with me is that in the question, it was his first visit. It
Mm-hmm.
was the first time seeing the client. So we have to assess because we don't know. You just walking in our office. So we have to build rapport and get to know the client.
Are you suggesting to me that because I've read all of the books on Hispanic population that maybe I don't really know the right answer? Is that what you're saying?
No, no, I'm saying that in the
Yes, you
question,
are. Yes, you are. It's okay. Reading books has nothing to do with this one client, right?
And
right.
that's
Okay, that's exactly. I'm going to take it from a personal point of view, and I have people that say, "Well, I have a black friend." That
and
does
that's
not mean that you know all black culture or anything about me, right?
Right.
We've got
and that's
these
why
stereotypes we need to learn for the test, but until I actually talk to you, I don't know.
Yeah.
Good
Right.
answer. Go
and
ahead.
that's why I answered D because and I know I need to just keep it strict. I feel like the test makes you be stereotypical because I don't like when people assume because I'm black, you know everything about me. So that's why just because you read some books about my culture doesn't mean I just take that as a sign of disrespect for me. But this is the test, and I feel like the test is stereotypical.
So, and I'm going to agree with that. So remember, the test wasn't written for you. The test was written for upper class white families. Jane Addams, remember Jane Addams? The test was based on that. So that's the viewpoint you need to come from.